So this year, I thought, why not get into shipbuilding instead of getting an icon pass? I just find shipbuilding so relaxing. Definitely don't regret not getting an icon pass. Shipbuilding's way better.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us today for Diversifying Your Board, a Strategic Approach. I'm Emily Newman. I'm the Executive Director of Camber. Camber is a nonprofit organization dedicated to creating and sustaining inclusive, equitable, and diverse workplaces across the $887 billion outdoor recreation economy. Camber delivers systemic and scalable workplace supports and industry-wide results. More diverse companies are better able to meet organizational goals, win top talent, improve customer orientation, employee satisfaction, and decision-making. And all that leads to a virtuous cycle of increasing returns, both for individuals, companies, and communities. I'm excited to be here with you today and to introduce to our 200 plus Camber partners, our guests. Renita Smith, who leads as our Chief Programs Officer at Camber Outdoors, and Virgil Roberts, the chair of the African American Board Leadership Institute. Renita?
Thanks, Emily. I'm Chief Programs Officer of Camber, and today it is truly my honor and pleasure to introduce Virgil Roberts as our keynote guest. Virgil is managing partner and founder of the law firm Bobbitt and Roberts, which specializes in representing entertainment clients in television, film, and music. Prior to this, Virgil was president of Solar Records, one of the most successful Black-owned record companies in the 1980s. His early work as a civil rights attorney with Manning and Roberts included representing the NAACP in the Los Angeles school desegregation case, Crawford versus Board of Education. He currently serves on many boards, including Community Build, Claremont Graduate School, Families in Schools, the Alliance of Artists and Record Companies, Southern California Public Radio, Broadway Federal Bank, Great Public Schools Now, and the Alliance for College-Ready Public Schools. He has served as chairman of the Los Angeles Education Partnership, chairman of the board of the California Community Foundation, treasurer of the Los Angeles Private Industry Council, and vice chair of the Public Education Fund Network. While he was board chair of the Los Angeles Annenberg Metropolitan Project, the organization raised and spent more than $120 million to reform public education in the LA Basin. Virgil was recently awarded the Lifetime Achievement Award from the 100 Black Men of Los Angeles and has been honored by the Los Angeles Urban League, the NAACP Legal Defense and Education Fund, the University of Southern California School of Education, and the UCLA Black Alumni Association. He holds a bachelor's degree from UCLA and a JD from Harvard Law School, where he was a Felix Frankfurter Scholar. And both Emily and I are beyond honored to have him. We had the pleasure of working with him on the transformation of an area of South Los Angeles through the Los Angeles Urban League. And Virgil has always been a tremendous resource to us and to the entire community. So thank you so much, Virgil, for joining us today.
Thank you. I'm pleased to be with you this morning.
Thank you. And I'd like to start off by asking you to tell us, Virgil, a bit about the African American Board Leadership Institute. We have seen a focus on diversification of boards explode, particularly in the wake of the death of George Floyd. It's become a major issue of emphasis. Board challenges have been initiated. Various companies are signing pledges. But the African American Board Leadership Institute has been at this work of diversifying boards and equipping both companies and leaders to join boards and be a part of boards and have effective boards for quite a long time. Can you talk a little bit about the African American Board Leadership Institute and how it got started?
Yeah, well, let me tell you how we got started. We got started because over the years, I served on a lot of nonprofit boards. You mentioned some that I currently serve on. There are others that I've served on in the past. And one of the things that I came to understand is that for most nonprofit organizations, for corporations, governing commissions, a lot of the decisions about the allocation of resources really flows from the board down. There's an old saying, fish rots from the head down. And so in the early years when I became very active in nonprofit service in late 70s, early 80s. And oftentimes I was the only Black person on the board. And what I learned is that there can be a certain kind of groupthink around a boardroom table because there's a tendency for people, especially in many companies, many nonprofit organizations, the board members come from contacts of board members. It's sort of like you get together and say, who do you know? And so what you begin to get is a certain sameness around the board table. And what that does, it does not allow you to necessarily think outside the box, to see other opportunities. And so when I would talk to people about diversifying the boards, maybe adding more Black members, kept getting said, well, we look for people, we can't find any. And so 10 years ago, I said, rather than my going to people and saying you ought to find a more diverse board, and people would oftentimes say, okay, I'm for that, give me a name. And then I realized I didn't necessarily have names at my fingertips. So I thought what we should do is create an organization that really focuses on recruiting people of color, giving them the skill sets they need to be effective board members, and then helping them become part of governing boards. This slide comes from a fairy tale that all of us know, The Emperor's New Clothes. And I use it a lot as a metaphor because so often when you do not have diverse boards, what you end up with is groupthink, and people will not see solutions that are right in front of them. They won't think about attacking problems in a different way. And this is a fairy tale that everybody knows, and I use it with a lot of funders and stuff that I met with. I said, you remember that fairy tale we were taught where the emperor was told that he had the finest cloths, the very best silks that could be made. And so the con men had convinced him that he had this really fine wardrobe that they were developing, and nobody wanted to be stupid. So all of the people at court would come and say, yes, we agree. This is really great. These are beautiful clothes. And it wasn't until the emperor decided he was going to parade around town and show off his new garments that the little boy said, look, the emperor has no clothes. And what that represented to me is what you get when you have people who think outside the box. Oftentimes in a boardroom setting, there can be a way of doing things that people have always done. And really, it is the most successful companies that usually have that sort of myopia that they don't see. They become successful because they're dominant. Because they're dominant, they think they're doing it the right way. And therefore, people rise up in the ranks doing it their way. And before you know it, all of the executives in the company see everything the same way, and they miss unbelievable opportunities. So think about IBM, which decided, I guess now maybe 40 years ago, nobody would ever want to have a personal computer. So even though they had invested in software and done other things, they said, I can't imagine people having a home computer. We build mainframes. They literally gave their software business to Bill Gates. And that's where Microsoft became. And Microsoft ended up being bigger than IBM. So fast forward 20 years, Sergey Brin and Larry Page go to Microsoft and say, we have an idea for organizing information on the internet. And we'd like for you to invest in our company. There's nobody at Microsoft who was doing software saw any value to organizing information on the internet. And so they missed out on the opportunity to have Google. So if you study economic history, it's littered with the remains of great companies that became so great that they believed that they had all the answers. They talked to each other, and before they knew it, there was a new company that came along and ate their lunch. So one of the things that you have to do if you want to be successful is really making sure that you have a diversity of ideas and opinion around the board table to help you identify opportunities, to help you identify new lines of business. And so I love this sort of graphic because everybody relates to the story, they understand it. And so what I say to executives is think about your boardroom table. Who's around the table? Are you getting a diversity of views that can help your company be more successful? And the next slide, and for those of you in the audience, I'm going to assume that you're all well-educated people and you can read the slides. So I'm not going to read you the slides, but they're there so that you have an idea of the thought process that we go through, something you can take notes on. And I'm sure that Camber will make all of these slides available to you if you ask, after we finish this presentation. But, as I said, what I began to notice is in my work, there was just a dearth of diversity around a lot of boardroom tables. And we started ably a decade ago. We started talking about creating it in 2010. We did our first training sessions in 2011. And over the last decade, we've trained literally hundreds of African-American professionals. What we believe is that we are contributing to the health of our society and community by finding smart people who want to serve, who want to be engaged, and then equipping them with the skills so that they can go and participate in the boardroom and be a meaningful and active board member. So we make sure that our people understand financial statements, how to read a financial statement, how to dig into the finances to understand if an entity is successful or if it has problems. We talk about boardroom etiquette. We have a whole section we call on soft power. How do you participate actively, be someone who advocates for positions you think are important, and yet do not get tarred with quote unquote playing the race card or being a one-note board member. And we think that the training that we do is really designed to help African Americans develop the skills so when they go into the boardroom, they will immediately be an effective and substantive participant. The abject numbers of people of color in boardrooms has become known to all. And in part of the work we did, one of the things that we did do, we spent a lot of time studying the marketplace. And something that I came across was a McKinsey white paper that McKinsey and Company did after the Great Recession of 2008, 2009. And what they were interested in learning is what are the indicia of successful companies that weather downturns, that are able to come up with new products and diversify. And what they found, the empirical evidence is overwhelming that the more diverse companies turned out to be the ones that weathered the recession the best. They made more money. They had better relationships with their employees. They had a better understanding of their marketplace. And as a consequence, McKinsey began to develop, and they still develop. For those of you who have used McKinsey, go online and check out McKinsey and Diversity, and you will find a series of studies and papers that point to how important it is for you to have a diverse board. Now, the African American board leadership, we really focus on African Americans and Blacks, but what McKinsey talks about is you need a diversity of people who have lived experiences that are different, because that's what will help you be better at problem solving. That's what will help you identify market niches that you may not even be aware of their existence. And so there's just a wealth of great information about why you need to have organizations that will help train and bring a diverse pool of candidates to boards. We started Ably because, like with any business, and I've been in business, you kind of do a SWOT analysis. You want to know what's out there. Who are the competitors? Who's doing it already? Can you do what they do? Can you do it better? And after a few months of research, what we discovered is there was no organization in America that trained African Americans for board service on both for-profit, not-for-profit, government commissions. We became the only organization that really does that kind of work. And as a result, we've had people go through our programs from all over the United States, from the Virgin Islands, from as far away as Maine, as far north as Canada, and all the southern states, because people go online looking for an opportunity to increase their leadership skills, their abilities. A lot of folks want to serve on boards. And so when you go out and do research to say, who can help me gain the skills I need to be a good, effective board member, they end up finding us. And we literally get emails and phone calls from all over the country, and a few calls from overseas.
Wow, that's tremendous.
That's wonderful. Virgil, I know we're going to jump into a little bit more about your thoughts about board diversification, but I would love to just sort of ask, we get the question a lot at Camber about how to connect to organizations that are doing work like Ably is doing. Is Ably an organization that corporations or that nonprofits who are looking for nonprofit leaders, in addition to the folks who are seeking training, should and can be in touch with about prospective board members?
The short answer to that is yes. We would really like to hear from people who want board members. We've placed over the years maybe 250, 300 people, but we have a list that exceeds 700 people who are ready, willing, and able to serve. And we've expanded the work that we've done over the years, especially in the nonprofit sector, because many nonprofit organizations are now taking the position that they will not give you a grant. They won't support your organization unless you have a diverse board and diverse employees. And so of recent, what we've been doing is working with organizations to help make them ready for diversity. So often people will say, we had a Black board member, we had a Latino board member, but they didn't stay. And part of that can be that there are things that you need to do as an organization to be welcoming to diverse candidates. And so part of those services that we provide to organizations is we will work with your board to help your board become ready to receive diverse candidates. It's not enough to just think we're open, we're going to have someone come, but there are a lot of behaviors that folks adopt without realizing that has the effect of making people feel unwelcome. And so what we try and do is help organizations think through what their onboarding process is, think through how they relate within a boardroom, and we help them develop the kinds of skills and techniques so that when somebody comes that's a diverse candidate to their organization, they feel welcome. They learn how to embrace folks. They learn how to do more than just say, we have an affirmative action board member. We have one. We've got a woman. We've got somebody that's Black. But really thinking through how do we make sure that we operate in a way that makes us a diverse organization and a welcoming organization. And we help people do that.
Virgil, thank you so much for those insights. Can you talk a little bit more about why board diversification is so important?
Well, I can talk a little bit more about it. I like my image of the emperor has no clothes, but the next thing I usually talk about is look at what McKinsey is saying about the success of companies that are diverse, their ability to problem solve, their ability to find new niche markets. So let's say, for example, let's talk about your organization and the number of people who are involved in outdoor recreational activities. Well, there are organizations designed like there's an Afro Outdoors organization. There literally are organizations made up of African Americans who are interested in camping and being outdoors and stuff. It is a whole market that I think oftentimes is overlooked. If you had somebody that was Black on your board, they might well say, I know people who camp, and I know where they are, and I know how we can reach that market and begin to expand that market and create more wealth for our organization. The state of California, for example, I did a program with them recently, and there's a huge effort to try and get more people from the inner city to begin to use state parks and state resources. And so what I think is that the value of diversity you begin to see once you really understand how to use it and the power of it. When I was at UCLA, I'll give you an example of a college. When I was at UCLA, in this long time, it was more than 50 years ago when I went to college. And Chuck Young was a young chancellor. Chuck was 37, 38 years old when he became chancellor at UCLA. And he set out on a mission to try and make that campus more diverse. And the more diverse that UCLA became, the higher rated the institution was. So that if you now look and say, what would be maybe the number one, number two public university in America, it's now generally considered to be UCLA. And it's one of the most diverse schools in the country. They have more poor people, kids who get Pell Grants than any other school in America. And yet they were able to increase the quality as they increase the diversity. So there are lots of examples across the board from the companies that McKinsey writes about to universities like UCLA, which demonstrates the strength of diversity in making your institution a better place.
That's such a powerful point. And we have this slide up really just to present a few facts that back up the points that you were just making, Virgil, because I think the argument that we can't find qualified talent for the board, there's a pipeline problem, that argument's dying. A 2017 PwC survey of 900 directors found that a majority now recognize how beneficial diversity is. 94% said gender and racial diversity bring unique perspectives, and 82% agreed that it enhances board performance and company performance. So, right. And this is only...
I mean, those are real facts. And so ABLE came about in part, to answer your question, to people who are saying, we really want to diversify our board, but we can't find people. So what we wanted to do was to take away that lack of ability to find people and to raise our hand and say we got people. So to all of you out in the audience this morning, if you're really interested in diversifying your board and you said, gee, we can't find people, I got tons of great people that can help you in your organization.
That's wonderful. And we're seeing the imperative of board diversification only increase given the presence of millennials in the workforce and in the consumer marketplace. They really want companies to align with their values, and they are the most diverse generation in history. And I believe today Edelman released its Trust Barometer report. Emily, could you talk a little bit about one of the findings there about the importance of corporate leadership on diversity issues?
Yeah. Their Trust Barometer indicated today that in 2021, increasingly employees are looking to corporate leadership and have the highest level of trust for corporate leadership, and also expect that corporate leadership to be participating in social issues and taking a stand on social issues, that's very important for the future workforce. And so when we talk about the engagement of corporate boards, the engagement of corporate leadership, of course, it's so incredibly important to have that variety of viewpoints so that as you are tackling the challenges of the years to come, that you have that great insight.
Exactly. And
well, I think, again, I talk about diversity, there are different dimensions, but youth is also a dimension. I'm in, well, I won't say how old I am, but I see the change in America, because if you watch TV, what you will see now is almost every commercial has a mixed race couple, a diverse couple. And it's simply because the consumers that are going to be the ones who buy your products for the next 30, 40, 50 years, they are millennials. And it's a very different cohort of people than past generations of Americans. They're more racially, ethnically diverse. They have a very different value system, and they shop and vote with their values. Things like climate change, they see as an existential threat. They're concerned about the environment. For those of you who are involved in outdoor recreation, that's your group. That's a group of people who want to get back to the land. There more of them are going to national parks and things than ever before. And they will judge you as a company by whether or not you do good, or quote unquote, as they say, do evil. And so one of the ways that you want to make sure that you don't lose touch with your consumer base is to make sure that you have some people around the boardroom table making decisions that will help you understand that consumer base, that will help you understand the niche markets, that will allow you to expand your business and to be more successful. And just as importantly, having people around the boardroom table that your employees will be motivated because you're a company that is being diverse, and you're not talking about it. You're being about it. You're living it out. And it has an incredible impact with young consumers.
exactly. And in fact, 83% of millennials say that they want to see leadership on these issues from their CEOs. So that speaks to CEO and board level leadership. And as I just have a few points up here for everyone to see on many of the points you discussed, Virgil, that give companies with diverse boards a competitive edge. And the one that you just mentioned, leading by example by modeling diversity and inclusion from the very highest levels of the organization, is quite a compelling reason in and of itself to diversify your board, in addition to strengthening your company brand, revenue, reputation, investment options, and your overall decision making.
So why don't we go to the next slide? The strategies for diversifying your board. This slide is really designed for those of you in the audience to take note of some of the strategies that can be followed to help you think about how you go about diversifying your board. One of the things that I think you always have to do is, if you're a good board, and this is what we teach people in our classes, is you should continually evaluate yourself as a board. what are our strong points? What are our weak points? And you have to be intentional when it comes to diversifying your board. And by intentionality, I mean you have to decide this is something we believe we're going to do. And then once you decide it's something you're going to do, then you do what most people do when you decide it's an imperative. You leave no stone unturned. What I've said to some of the boards I've talked to, you should do what the NFL did many, many years ago. It was a league in which almost 70% of the players were black and there were no black coaches. So Dan Rooney came up with what became the Rooney Rule, and it simply was, before you hire a brand new coach, make sure that you have a diverse candidate in the pool. Doesn't mean that you're going to hire them, but it means that you are going to seriously look, not just have someone to say you check the box, but really hire somebody that has the potential to serve as a coach and interview them. And lo and behold, in a matter of a few years, there were a number of black coaches that began to coach in the NFL, and some of them were revelations. I'm a football fan, and I remember when the Steelers picked Mike Tomlin, who kind of came from nowhere, and yet he became one of the winningest coaches in football. So there have been a few coaches that would never have gotten an opportunity if people hadn't said, okay, we're going to be intentional. We're going to look outside the box and try and find talent in places where maybe we haven't looked before. Some of you may have said, well, in this moment with all the Black Lives Matter protests and the commitment to doing anti-racist sort of things, I want to change my company, but I don't know where to go. And that's where people like us stand up. But there are also organizations that Emily and Renita came from who had a long history, the Urban League, of really developing candidates and placing them with businesses. So once you make a determination, you're going to go find talent. Even though you don't know where it is, it's out there. We're here. There are other organizations that exist that can help you find the talent. And then you will be able to find talent no matter what your needs may be. It may be you need somebody to be on your finance and audit committee. You may need someone who is an expert in governance. You may need somebody who really is a HR person. Believe me, that talent is there and it's available, well-educated, in many cases with a lot of experience. They just may not be in your social network or the social network of your board members. And so you have to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And what I mean by that is you have to become comfortable with looking outside of the usual suspects to find candidates who could be transformative for your business.
Hear, hear. And on that note, I'd like to just mention a few other organizations that are also doing work with various populations, such as the Latino Corporate Director Executive Foundation's Board Ready Institute, Latinos Lead, Latinos for Leadership Excellence and Diversity, which trains Latinos for nonprofit board service. BS Out Leadership Quorum has a database of qualified LGBTQ plus director candidates, as well as some other organizations such as the Executive Leadership Council Corporate Board Initiative, which has a focus on Black executives. So there are definitely organizations out there.
That's right.
Trying to provide that pool of talent.
Yeah. You didn't mention LEAP, which is an Asian Pacific leadership organization based in Los Angeles that has existed for many years, and their sole focus has been on Asian Pacific Islanders, many of whom are already working in a corporate setting to help them upgrade their leadership skills and their ability so they can become more effective executives and board members. So as Renita says, there are people out there laboring in the vineyards. And all you need to do as an organization is make a commitment that you really are going to try and find diverse talent. There is diverse talent in this country.
Exactly.
Virgil, sometimes we get folks who are concerned about reaching out at the wrong time, or who are reaching out sort of in an urgent moment. What would you say to leaders, folks who work on governance committees, around board recruitment as sort of an ongoing process? Is that something that an ABLE or some of these other organizations that outreach, that they would be interested in those ongoing relationships? Is that the kind of thing that a board nominating committee should only reach out when they are looking for someone?
Now, most boards, and I've been on a board. In fact, I chair our governance and nominating committee for the bank that I'm on the board of. And it's a for-profit organization. We work on developing a bank of names, just almost like a headhunter firm, so that we're always thinking about people that may become candidates for the board, not now, but maybe in 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, because most organizations, we happen to be publicly traded, there are requirements for the people who sit on your audit committee. You really need a finance person. They can sometimes be hard to find. So I think that if the committee is doing their job, you should always be working at developing a bank of names of people that you may not need today, you may not need tomorrow, you may not need for a year or two, but that's your job as a committee and as a business. Just like you're always thinking about, product mixes and where you're going to go, and you'll have maybe a 3-year, 5-year plan that you're continually trying to update. You should have a succession plan. What happens if the CEO has a heart attack unexpectedly? What are you going to do? You should also have plans for how you're going to continue to populate your boards. And that's where you reach out to organizations like ABLE and say, well, we don't need anybody right now, but could you send us over some names so maybe we can begin to take somebody to lunch and meet them and get to know them, so that when it comes time to fill a position, we're not acting in an emergency situation. We have a plan. That's what a succession plan is. And a well-run organization should have a succession plan for its board of directors, so that you have an idea of candidates that are qualified that you would reach out to, that you already know who they are.
Virgil, you made an important point about evaluating the needs, the gaps in competencies, and really identifying where the areas of need are before recruiting to diversify your board. And that's a very key point. And I'd like to highlight one of your blog posts on your website. And the ABLE website is quite a resource because it has everything from questions to ask if you're considering joining a board, to questions to ask prospective board members. But one of the powerful blog posts was written by one of your candidates, I believe, one of your graduates.
Yeah, one of our graduates, yeah.
Yep. And he basically talked about recruiting for board diversity without disrespecting people of color. And he talked about an experience in which he was being recruited and vetted for a board, but the person interviewing him really had no idea of the breadth of his skill set.
Right.
So it seemed as if he were just being invited into the process only for his race. And it really was demeaning, actually, because the ideal board member is bringing a set of skills beyond just their racial identity.
That's correct. And again, that's one of the things when we talk with boards about being open and receptive to diverse candidates. There is sometimes George Bush used this phrase, and I use it a lot: soft bigotry of low expectation. And when you have high achievers and you treat them like they're not really full-fledged board members, they don't really know things, I can remember I was on a board once that I left. That I got recruited to the board by the CEO, but then the chairman of the board took me out for lunch. I thought he wanted to do an orientation, and what he wanted to do was to talk to me about how you go about raising funds. Now you mentioned in my introduction, one of the school reform groups I work with, we raised $120 million. I've raised literally tens of millions of dollars in the years in which I've been involved in the nonprofit sector. And my interaction with him told me he had no idea who I was, what my skills were, what I could do to help the organization. And so I ended up resigning. And a couple of years later, one of the members of the board who'd been on the board with me called me up and asked me to have lunch with him to help him do some fundraising and to find board members. And he said, "Boy, we really made a mistake when we let you get away." And I said, "Well, it wasn't you, it was your chair. He was just offensive. I'm a volunteer. I'm doing things like everybody else around the board. And yet I really felt, for lack of a better word, disrespected. And I said, if I'm going to go volunteer my time to try and help an organization, I'm not going to go a place where I don't feel that you're treating me like a quote unquote full-fledged board member." And so one of the things that we tell our Ably alums is you have to interview organizations that you're going to make sure that they are not going to treat you as a lesser board member because of who you are. That's an interview you have to do because we expect our people, when they go on boards, to be fully participant and be ready to lead. All the Ably graduates, when they leave our program, they're really ready to be the chairman of a board. It doesn't mean they're going to be, but we prepare them so that they have the ability to be. And so they should, so when you're recruiting people, don't engage in that soft bigotry of low expectation. You should, whether it's an Ably alum or anyone, you should expect the same degree of professionalism, skill, and talent from a person of color that you would expect from a person who doesn't have color, because you're bringing them to your board to make it a better team. A board is a team that helps lead and run an organization. Everyone has a role to play. And if you build a strong board, everybody has a role, there's mutual respect, and what the board will do is they will help that company perform at the highest possible level.
We have had such a robust discussion on this topic that we are out of time and actually over time. So what I'd like to do is just run us through the remaining slides so that you have an idea what's there. And if you have questions, please email us at info@camberoutdoors.org, and we will get back to you. We'll circle with Virgil and add our own insights, and we'll get back to you with answers to those questions. Right now, what I'll do is just take us on a spin through our remaining points. Essentially, in terms of strategies for board diversification, the key is to adopt a no excuses approach, reject the pipeline excuse, as Virgil talked about, and be very intentional about how you develop your candidate pool to ensure that it's diverse, and apply the Rooney Rule. Avoiding common pitfalls. Virgil addressed this with the issue of treating board members as less than full board members when they're merely sort of bodies around the table, but not having their voices be valued. It's very important to prepare to avoid that and to ensure that your board is inclusive in order to allow for the voices to be heard. Avoid the traditional experience barrier, which is banking solely on whether the candidates have served on a board previously or are at C-suite level. Some of these artificial barriers to service that prevent companies from and nonprofits from achieving the most diverse boards that they could. And it's very important that we begin to look for talent through different lenses. And then this avoids the issue of one or two or three Black people or people of diverse backgrounds serving on 40 boards. There are far more people than just one, two, or three to serve on the boards. And then there are some very important trends in board diversification. There are mandates that have emerged. Goldman Sachs saying they won't bring a company to market via IPO unless there is diverse representation on the board. AB 979, which is a California law that requires at least one director on boards from an underrepresented community. And by 2022, it will be increased. So there will be even a higher number of representatives from diverse communities required on boards. And hot off the press, December 2020, NASDAQ announced that they will require boards to have at least one woman and one director who identifies as an underrepresented minority or LGBTQ plus member. And companies that don't meet this requirement will be delisted from NASDAQ. So that's a serious consequence that could affect many of the companies represented here today. Emily?
Sure. Well, first, we just want to thank you, Virgil, so much for joining us today and for this rich discussion. Obviously, you can tell we could talk to no end on this important topic. And it is top of mind. And we recognize that for all of our corporate partners, all of our nonprofit partners who are really putting a shoulder to leading in the space of workplace diversity, equity, and inclusion. So we have invited Virgil to return to participate in our Apex series, which is a series focused on insights for our C-suite leaders. He has already indicated that he would be open to joining us again to do an even deeper dive on some of those facets of recruiting excellent board members for the 21st century. So thank you again, Renita Smith, Virgil Roberts, for joining me and Camber Outdoors and all of our folks in the audience today, listening to and learning on this important topic. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and thank you to the audience for listening. This is an important conversation for the future of our country and for our business community. So I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today.
Would I normally get the Icon Pass? Sure. But with all that Gertrude's got going on, planning her wedding and whatnot, there's just no time. Do I regret not getting the Icon Pass? Yeah, right.
Yeah, you do. You're cooped up here, losing your mind.
That's not true.